It's a death trap, it's a suicide rap, we gotta get out while we're young. 'Cause tramps like us, baby, we were born to run. Yes, we were, babe. And welcome back to StillerBros at the Movies.
And today we are seeing another biopic.
Let's go into the Badlands with Deliver Me From Nowhere. Sorry. Springsteen, Deliver Me From Nowhere. Because I guess the studio didn't have faith that people were going to see this movie unless you put the name of the guy the movie's about in the title.
So, about 50 years ago, the world was introduced to a little Jersey kid named Bruce Springsteen.
And for years and years and years, Bruce Springsteen has basically been the storyteller of the working class people throughout the entire United States and other countries too. Let's not pretend that Bruce Springsteen is exclusively an American phenomenon.
But what is it with Jersey guys and being storytellers? I mean, between him and Kevin Smith, there must be something in the water over there. I mean, even Frankie Valli had to stop his own musical dead so he could talk to the audience.
But the important thing is that Bruce Springsteen has been a storyteller for decades and decades.
So naturally, he was probably one of the more obvious choices to have a biopic because he's told his life story so many times over the last 5 decades.
And I guess you could easily map the way that a Bruce Springsteen biopic would go, even though, as far as I know, Bruce Springsteen never had, like, a huge drug problem in the 80s that led to a bunch of people deciding, oh, we need to have the ups and downs and send this guy to rehab.
No, as far as we can tell, Bruce Springsteen never had some of the classic biopic tropes, hence why this time around they're doing kind of what Patrick Willems in his 2 video essays on music biopics suggested that they do with music biopics, and they're focusing on one particular era of his life.
So with this movie, they're specifically focusing on the era in which Bruce Springsteen recorded what might be the most seminal album in his entire discography, Nebraska. And so we find ourselves in 82. Yeah, I know I did that last time.
And it's kind of interesting because this is an era where Bruce is somewhat established. He has put out Born to Run, and at this point in time, he's coming off of a wildly successful tour with the River Tour. Him and the E Street Band have their first top 10 single with Hungry Heart, and so they're going off into the studio to record their next follow-up, and we get to this point in the 80s where Bruce makes a massive creative leap, and it's just a fascinating time to be Bruce Springsteen, where he was the exact same age we are right now.
Now, the thing about Nebraska is not to disparage the legacy of one of the most important rock albums of all time. It's basically the album in which Bruce Springsteen invented SoundCloud rap. Because Nebraska is Bruce Springsteen all alone, playing all his instruments into a 4-track, which at the time was the most advanced kind of technology that they could have had to record an album all by yourself. But it is also an album where Bruce Springsteen created a bunch of demos, took them to his manager to have them get put together to make an album, and then that album just didn't end up getting made because he didn't like the way that the full band arrangements were sounding, so instead they just released the demos.
Yeah. But that's kind of the thing with this album, and then the next album was his most iconic album, Born in the USA.
Yeah, it really says something when these songs were supposedly not fitting in with Born in the USA, and it still ended up being one of the most iconic albums in rock and roll history.
Yeah, but obviously we're kind of fans of Springsteen. We're not. Springsteen was kind of a thing, obviously, around because obviously he's so ever present. Our dad had vinyls of him. Our mom was actually at the first show of the Born in the USA tour and saw the filming of the Dancing in the Dark music video.
And our cousin Ben has played Bruce Springsteen on television a few times.
Then the next summer, my friends and I worked at a drive-in movie theater with no speakers. We got paid 20 cents an hour to lean in people's windows and tell them what was happening. It was a good job, but it wasn't as good as rock and roll. Ha, 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 hey!
12 years and 200 plus episodes, we finally get to make that joke.
But the important thing is that Bruce Springsteen has been a staple of American life for years. Basically, if you've listened to a rock song over the years, or even if you just listened to a holiday music station and heard his cover of Santa Claus is Coming to Town, you've at least been touched by the spirit of Bruce Springsteen.
And it kind of is a weird timing that this came out after A Complete Unknown, because this was also around a time when Springsteen was being compared to Bob Dylan, at least lyrically.
And the comparison between this and A Complete Unknown is going to be there, mostly for the fact that, well, one, very similar aesthetics. Both are biopics about this very specific person in this very specific time in their life, with this very specific aesthetic of guys who like to play guitar and play harmonica and just have these dense lyrics about political stuff revolving around the common everyday person. Though, of course, the difference is, one, A Complete Unknown is about Bob Dylan expanding his sound and adding a full band, and Deliver Me From Nowhere is the story of Bruce Springsteen doing something completely by himself without his band. And two, technically the directors are different in ways. The director is Scott Cooper, the guy who is probably best known for giving Jeff Bridges his Oscar by directing the movie Crazy Heart, which is a favorite of mine, at least. I'm sure it's a favorite of yours too.
I mean, probably not as I probably wouldn't rank it up there with my favorites, but it is a movie I do love a lot because it is such a great movie.
And Scott Cooper, as a director, has not gone as mainstream in his works since then as James Mangold has with the work that he's done since Walk the Line. But with this is Scott Cooper working with a major studio for the first time in a long time, because after he made Black Mass, the movie in which Johnny Depp plays Whitey Bulger, basically his movies just kind of became these like underground limited release things that basically your dad watches.
Yeah, but also taking on this role, we have Jeremy Allen White, primarily known for stuff like The Bear, Shameless, and Iron Claw.
Though, of course, I'm sure Jeremy Allen White is at least a little bit happy that he's going to be doing a role this close to the Bear release, in which he doesn't have to scream as much of his dialogue as he usually does.
Fuck off my expo set now!
And then filling out the supporting cast, we have actors like Jeremy Strong, Paul Walter Hauser, Odessa Young, Mark Maron.
It's basically the kind of stacked cast that you can get when you want to make a smaller movie.
It's a smaller kind of independent-ish movie where...
Well, it's not independent in the sense that this is 20th Century Studios.
Yeah, but it's smaller in the sense that it's not like a big blockbuster. It's just a smaller biopic that doesn't seem like it's going to need a massive budget.
Yeah, because originally this was supposed to be an A24 movie, but then the bidding war for the rights to this particular story came around, and they ended up going with 20th Century Studios. So it's gonna have quite a bit of money thrown at it because, you know, when you make a period piece, you kind of need money. And this period piece takes place almost 50 years ago.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah.
But, yeah. What else is there to say? Springsteen is an American icon, has been for a long time, and Jeremy Allen White's a good actor. Scott Cooper is a good director. What else could there be? And also the songs from Nebraska are really good.
Yes. We listened to the album to prepare, and it is a really, really good album.
It's one of those albums where you listen to it and you're like, okay, I understand exactly why people like this. Because it is very much an album that, even if you strip away the whole, it's impressive that Bruce Springsteen was able to do all of this with nothing but a 4-track recorder in his bedroom. It still is a really good album with like amazingly deep and sometimes poetically weird lyrics and very melodic songs that can go from heavy to fun to rockabilly strange. So yeah, think that this is kind of the story that could be told. And once again, as a biopic, focusing on this one specific thing could build onto it. And I've already stated before that this is one of my favorite genres of true story movie, creative people making iconic art. So I don't see why this shouldn't be as good as it could possibly be. But I guess we'll find out after the jump. So that was really good.
Yeah.
I do have thoughts that basically it's not a perfect movie, but
No.
in terms of the genre, it's pretty solid.
Yeah. It's one of those biopics that makes me think a little more what they made up and what is true. Like, we saw Springsteen on Broadway earlier this week to get kind of our bearings on Springsteen as a person. And one of the stories he tells in that special is actually in the movie. So
Actually, a couple of the stories, but they moved the order around a little bit.
yeah.
So there are scenes that, like, literally one of the last scenes in this movie between Bruce Springsteen and his father does seem to be taken from a story that Bruce would tell in his Broadway residency, but we, having seen that Broadway residency, know for a fact that that takes place like a good maybe 7 years down the line at least.
Let's just get into it a little bit. One of the big parts of this movie is just kind of demonstrating the complicated relationship that Bruce Springsteen has with his father.
Yeah, and I think it really is one of the main things that they wanted to focus on. Just the idea that Bruce Springsteen had this kind of complicated relationship with his father, who seems like he was just a kind of hard to love kind of guy who was stoic but also kind of tough and wanted to instill that in his son, which is, you know, the stereotypical working class father-son relationship that you kind of get, especially in stories like this where the whole thing is he's an artist beyond his time who wants to take over the world and make himself and make everybody understand his feelings.
Oh, the brilliant musician and artist had a blue-collar dad who was emotionally distant. How cliche.
Yeah, and depending on how true some of the things that are in here that we didn't hear Bruce Springsteen talk about is, we don't know. We've never read the book that this is based on, so for all we know, more than a couple of these things were kind of exaggerated to fit more into the grander narrative that is, this is the story of how Bruce Springsteen wrote the two albums that would eventually become Nebraska and Born in the USA.
Yeah, and it's especially when we get near the end of the story, do we really touch on Bruce's mental health?
Yeah, and it feels like that's a thread that kind of gets started at a certain point, but it's a little late in the movie.
The start of it is really late in the movie, and depression and mental health are battles that everyone, every now and again, will face. And the fact that they focus on it, and they make sure that at the end wrap up, we know that Bruce is still battling depression to this day. It just kind of makes everything a little bit more deep.
But I kind of think that if they had started that thread a little bit earlier to kind of build on, especially considering the fact that a good chunk of this movie, or at least the good chunk of the Nebraska sessions within the movie, are built around the idea of Bruce alone in this house, you know, very isolating feeling, just this small environment that has to play with. So I feel like adding this extra idea to it would have probably upped the stakes a little bit. Not that I'm saying that this is a bad movie, because Scott Cooper still remains a really solid director when it comes to smaller, more intimate stories to be built around characters. And also the fact that Bruce Springsteen in this movie briefly dates a woman who has a kid from a previous relationship. Gee, I wonder why Scott Cooper would be so comfortable with that after the other movie that we saw of his that is.
I mean, the man's directorial debut was basically a biopic of a fictional musician, so.
Yeah, but the other thing that I kind of think was a weak point in this movie is that whenever they have a scene where it's John Landau but not Bruce Springsteen, it feels like he's justifying Nebraska as just the only thing that his character has to do. I mean, it kind of feels like the note was every time Bruce Springsteen is on screen, somebody should say, "Where's Springsteen?"
I mean, one thing that I do really enjoy about this movie is Jeremy Allen White as Springsteen.
Oh, absolutely. Jeremy Allen White disappears more into Springsteen than I thought he would. Like, from Go, when we first see him there in the dressing room after a huge show, and it's just like, oh, wow, that's Bruce.
But at the same time, there are moments where Carmy kind of starts to come out, and the roles are similar, but Bruce is a more stoic, quieter person than Carmy.
Which is kind of by the nature. In a lot of ways, Jeremy Allen White seems to have found his niche as an actor, in which he's somewhat playing a guy built on masculinity, but with some of mental health problems, but a willingness to get better. Seems to be the main focus of what Jeremy Allen White characters tend to be in a post-Bear section of his career.
There's no room for toxic masculinity in this movie at all, especially when we get to the end and Bruce goes to therapy. Like, it's not one of those biopics where they're forced to go to therapy and they go to rehab and they spend a lot of time doing all of this. It's Bruce realizing he has a problem and doing the steps to solve it.
Now, whether or not this is 100% accurate to what happened, we don't know, but it's a different way of looking at it. And plus the fact that Bruce Springsteen was somewhat involved in the movie, but did not get a full-on credit to the movie, kind of speaks to the fact that he was aware of it, he visited the set a couple of times, but he probably was not sitting around with script veto power being like, no, we're not going to include this part where I look like a poor, terrible person.
No, especially because that's part of the Nebraska sessions is kind of Bruce being a bit of a pill when it comes to certain aspects of mastering that record.
And plus, there's other people in this movie. Odessa Young does pretty well as the one-time girlfriend of Bruce Springsteen, who has to kind of deal with the fact that she is kind of falling for this guy who's always keeping her at kind of an arm's length because he just feels like he's not good enough. He doesn't understand who he is as a person outside of this larger-than-life rock star persona that people are putting onto him. And so she gets a lot of work into realizing, oh, I'm falling for this guy, and I don't know how to deal with the fact that he's actively pushing me away.
Yeah, it's especially because Bruce isn't Bruce yet by the time we get to this movie. He's a local celebrity, and he's toured sold-out shows. He's got a top 10 single, but he's not the legendary legend and worldwide sensation that he would grow to become in the following years.
Yeah, and Nebraska in a lot of ways was the album that kind of started the push, even though they make a big deal out of the fact that they did not put out any songs in advance, they didn't do any press, and it somehow ended up in the top 3.
Yeah.
And then Paul Walter Hauser is here because I guess Disney is determined to make him co-star with every single prominent member of the cast of The Bear, but not actually put him in The Bear.
No, but him and Mark Maron and David Krumholtz have some sort of bit parts throughout the movie where they'll pop back in and be part of the action in a way.
Like, for a while, I was a little convinced that Mark Maron's part got almost entirely cut out by the fact that he was just kind of sitting there and not really talking. But then it's like, okay, we're going to give you like 1 or 2 things to actually do in this movie.
Yeah.
And David Krumholtz kind of comes in at the beginning and comes in at the end. He's kind of the closest thing that this movie has to a villain, even though he's still not depicted as a villain, because he is, like many other characters, just kind of in awe at just how wonderful of a genius Bruce Springsteen is. And I'm not saying Bruce Springsteen isn't a musical genius or anything like that. I'm just saying that this is just kind of the way that the movie defaults onto how they're going to treat Bruce Springsteen as a subject.
Yeah.
But all in all, Deliver Me From Nowhere is solid. It's a solid biopic, and as an advertisement for the record Nebraska, I think that, it's really good, and I think that people should listen to Nebraska, especially if they're into that kind of folk rockish sound of just a guy and a guitar and maybe like one or two other instruments if he has them nearby.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Yep.
That's it for right now. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to this channel, leave in the comments what you may or may not have thought of Deliver Me From Nowhere, and be sure to tune in next time when here is Sub-Zero, now Plane Zero. Bye.
99 bottles of beer on the wall. 99 bottles of beer.